The Deep Space Survey ship Harmony's Edge drifted through the darkness between stars. Its hull gleamed with a dull silver finish that reflected the distant light of Kepler 442, a yellow star, much like the one that warmed Earth. Captain HFY stood on the bridge, his forearms moving gracefully as he checked the ship's instruments. His insect-like face showed concentration, as his compound eyes scanned the data streams flowing across the main display. The Veltar had been exploring space for over 3,000 years. They were one of the founding members of the Confederacy, a group of alien species that worked together to map the galaxy and share knowledge. HFY had spent most of his life aboard survey ships, discovering new worlds and cataloging the endless variety of planets that orbited distant suns. This mission should have been routine. The Kepler 442 system had been marked on their charts for decades as unremarkable and low priority. 3 rocky planets orbited the star, all supposedly barren and lifeless. The Confederacy had bigger concerns than empty worlds. There were trade disputes to settle, new species to contact, and ancient ruins to explore on more promising planets. But the sensors were telling a different story today. "Captain," called Dr. Kretak from her science station. The female Veltar was smaller than HFY, with bright green markings on her carapace that indicated her specialty in xenobiology. She had joined the crew only 6 months ago, fresh from the Confederacy Science Academy. "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the 3rd planet." HFY moved to her station with the fluid grace typical of his species. His legs made soft clicking sounds on the metal deck as he walked. "What kind of signatures?" "That's just it, Captain. I'm not sure." Kretak's antennae twitched with confusion. "The patterns don't match any natural phenomena in our databases. They're too regular, too organized. But they're also too weak to be from any known technology." The captain studied the readings on her screen. Waves of energy pulsed from the planet's surface in steady patterns. They were definitely artificial, but they seemed primitive compared to the technology used by any spacefaring species in the Confederacy. "Could it be ruins from one of the extinct civilizations?" HFY asked. "Possible, but unlikely." Kretak pulled up more data on her screen. "The energy patterns are too fresh. These signatures can't be more than a few hundred years old at most." This was interesting. Very interesting. In all his years of exploration, HFY had rarely encountered active technology on worlds that were supposed to be empty. The discovery of a previously unknown civilization would be the find of a lifetime. "Set course for the 3rd planet," he ordered. "All departments prepare for a detailed survey." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Harmony's Edge was a modern ship, equipped with the most advanced sensors and analysis equipment the Confederacy could build. If there was life on that planet, they would find it. As they approached Kepler 442c, the readings became clearer and more puzzling. The planet was slightly larger than Earth, with 2 small moons and a thick atmosphere. Most of the surface was covered by vast oceans, with several large continents scattered across the globe. The climate appeared mild and stable. "Captain, this is very strange," reported Navigation Officer Thekmar from his station. "According to our long-range surveys, this planet should be uninhabitable." "Explain," HFY said. "The system's magnetic field is unstable. Every few days, massive radiation storms sweep across the inner planets. Any life on the surface should have been killed long ago." Thekmar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he checked his calculations. "But the sensors show clear signs of vegetation and possibly even cities." Dr. Kretak was running her own scans from the science station. "I'm detecting organized structures on the largest continent, geometric patterns that look like settlements, and Captain..." She paused, her antennae quivering with excitement. "I'm reading biosignatures, lots of them." The main screen lit up with an enhanced image of the planet's surface. Green continents were clearly visible through gaps in the white clouds. As the ship's powerful cameras focused on specific areas, the crew could see what looked like farmland, roads, and clusters of buildings. What species could survive here? SCI-FI muttered to himself. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission," announced Communications Officer Vrelnok. "It's coming from the planet." "Put it through." The bridge filled, with static for a moment, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking in accented but understandable galactic common. The language was used for communication between different species throughout the Confederacy. "Unknown vessel, this is New Sanctuary Flight Control. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." SCI-FI moved to the communications station. "This is Captain SCI-FI of the Veltar survey ship Harmony's Edge. We're conducting a routine exploration mission for the Confederacy. We didn't realize this system was inhabited." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "The Confederacy? We haven't heard that name in a very long time. Please stand by." Another voice came through the speakers, this one older and more careful. "Captain SCI-FI, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez, elected leader of New Sanctuary. We would be honored to meet representatives of the Confederacy. You're welcome to land at our main spaceport if your ship is capable of atmospheric flight. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. We'll be down shortly." As the Harmony's Edge descended through the planet's atmosphere, SCI-FI felt the familiar mixture of excitement and caution that came with first contact situations. The crew had followed standard protocols, but something about this whole situation felt unusual. "Captain, I'm still not understanding how they survived the radiation storms," Dr. Kretak said quietly. "My scans show that another one is building, right now. It should hit the planet in about 6 hours. Maybe they have better shielding technology than we realized," SCI-FI replied, but he wasn't entirely convinced. The spaceport was simple but well-maintained. A large flat area of concrete with several smaller buildings around the edges. As their ship touched down, SCI-FI could see a small group of beings waiting for them near the largest building. They were humans. SCI-FI had heard of humans, of course. They were a young species that had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. The Confederacy had made first contact with them about 50 years ago. From what he remembered, they were still confined to a small area around their home world, slowly expanding into nearby systems, but these humans were supposed to be impossible. The Confederacy's records showed no human colonies this far from Earth. This system was over 100 light-years from human space. "Interesting," Dr. Kretak murmured as she studied the welcoming committee through the ship's cameras. "They appear to be baseline humans, no obvious genetic modifications or technological augmentations." The landing party consisted of SCI-FI, Dr. Kretak, and 2 security officers. As they walked down the ship's ramp, the leader of the human group stepped forward. Dr. Elena Vasquez was a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore practical clothes that looked like they had been made locally, rather than imported from some high-tech manufacturing center. Her smile was warm but tired, like someone who had been dealing with difficult problems for a long time. "Welcome to New Sanctuary," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I have to admit, we never expected to see a Confederacy ship in our skies." SCI-FI carefully shook her hand with one of his 4 arms. The gesture felt strange, but friendly. "Dr. Vasquez, I have to ask, how did humans get here? Our records show no colonies this far from Earth." Elena's expression became sad. "We're the descendants of the colony ship Prometheus. She left Earth over 200 years ago during the early expansion period. We were supposed to establish a research station in the Kepler 438 system, but something went wrong with our navigation computers. We ended up here instead." "The Prometheus," SCI-FI repeated. He searched his memory for any reference to that ship name. "I believe that vessel was listed as lost with all hands." "Lost, yes, but not destroyed." Elena gestured toward the settlement visible in the distance. "Our ancestors managed to make an emergency landing here. They had enough equipment and supplies to establish a basic colony. We've been here ever since. Dr. Kretak stepped forward. How have you survived the radiation storms? Our scans show they should be lethal to most forms of life. Elena's answer came quickly, as if she had been expecting the question. Our ancestors were very clever. They built the main settlement in a valley that's naturally shielded by mineral deposits in the surrounding mountains. During storm periods, everyone stays underground in specially designed shelters. It was a reasonable explanation, but something about Elena's tone made SCI-FI think there was more to the story. We'd be honored to give you a tour of our settlement, Elena continued. It's not much compared to what you're probably used to, but we're proud of what we've built here. The tour was enlightening. New Sanctuary was indeed a modest settlement. The buildings were simple but well constructed, made mostly of local materials. The humans showed them farms where they grew various crops, workshops where they made tools and clothing, and schools where children learned basic subjects. Everything looked exactly like what SCI-FI would expect from an isolated human colony that had been cut off from galactic civilization for 2 centuries. The technology was primitive, but functional. The people seemed healthy and reasonably happy, though there was something in their eyes that suggested they had faced many hardships over the years. How many people live here? Dr. Kretak asked as they walked through the main residential area. Just under 50,000, Elena replied. We've been careful to manage our population growth. This planet can support us, but we can't afford to expand too quickly. What about contact with Earth? Have you tried to send messages? Elena shook her head. Our communications equipment was damaged during the landing. We've never had the resources to build anything capable of interstellar transmission. As the day went on, SCI-FI found himself genuinely impressed by what the colonists had accomplished. To survive on an isolated world for 2 centuries with limited technology was remarkable. The humans had shown the kind of determination and adaptability that made species successful in the galaxy. But Dr. Kretak seemed less convinced. During a private moment while Elena was showing the security officers around the workshop areas, she pulled SCI-FI aside. Captain, something doesn't feel right about this place. What do you mean? Look at these people, she whispered, gesturing toward a group of children playing in a nearby courtyard. They're too healthy, too strong. I've been scanning them discreetly, and their bone density is off the charts. Their muscle development is beyond anything I've seen in baseline humans. SCI-FI watched the children more carefully. They were indeed remarkably athletic, moving with a coordination that seemed unusual for their age. Maybe it's just the result of growing up in this planet's gravity, he suggested. The gravity here is almost identical to Earth standard, Kretak replied. And Captain, have you noticed how quickly they solve problems? Elena asked one of the teenagers to fix a broken water pump while we were watching. He diagnosed the issue and repaired it in under 5 minutes without any diagnostic equipment. Before SCI-FI could respond, Elena returned with the rest of their group. I hope you've enjoyed seeing our little community, she said. Would you like to stay for dinner? We don't get many visitors, and everyone would love to hear news from the wider galaxy. The dinner was held in the community center, a large building at the heart of the settlement. Dozens of humans attended, from young children to elderly residents, who claimed to remember stories their grandparents had told about Earth. The food was simple, but well prepared, made entirely from local ingredients. The conversation was lively and friendly. The colonists asked countless questions about the Confederacy, about new technologies, about what had happened on Earth in the centuries since the Prometheus had left. SCI-FI found himself relaxing, despite Dr. Kretak's concerns. These people seemed genuinely grateful for contact with the outside galaxy. They had been isolated for so long that news of other worlds and species was like a treasure to them. As the evening wound down, Elena made an announcement to the assembled crowd. Friends, Our visitors have given us a great gift today. They've reminded us that we're not alone in the universe. Tomorrow we'll begin discussing how we might re-establish contact with the Confederacy and perhaps even with Earth itself. The May crowd responded with enthusiastic applause. Many of the colonists approached SCI-FI and his crew to shake hands and express their gratitude. Later, as they walked back to their ship under the light of the planet's 2 moons, Dr. Kretak remained, troubled. "Did you notice that none of them seemed surprised to see us?" she asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "Think about it, Captain. They've been isolated for 200 years. The sudden appearance of an alien starship should have been the most shocking event in their history. But everyone we met treated it like they had been expecting us." SCI-FI considered this as they reached the Harmony's edge. "Perhaps they've always hoped that someone would find them eventually." "Maybe," Kretak said, but she didn't sound convinced. As the Veltar crew settled in for the night, none of them noticed the almost invisible sensors that had been tracking their every movement since they landed. Deep beneath New Sanctuary, in facilities that didn't appear on any surface scans, other humans were analyzing every word the aliens had spoken and every scan they had performed. The colonists had indeed been expecting visitors. They had been monitoring galactic civilization for decades, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. But not like this. Not yet. Elena Vasquez stood in her true office, located 50 meters underground in a complex that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Banks of advanced computers surrounded her, displaying information about the Veltar ship and its crew that the aliens would have been shocked to know existed. "Status report," she said to her chief of security. "All surveillance devices are functioning normally. The aliens suspect nothing beyond what Dr. Kretak has already observed. Their scans have not penetrated below the first sublevel." Elena nodded. "Good. How long before the next radiation storm?" 4 hours and 17 minutes. "Perfect. Make sure our guests see how we take shelter during the storm. It should reinforce their assumptions about our technology level." As the radiation storm built in the planet's magnetosphere, the Veltar crew prepared to witness how a primitive human colony survived one of the galaxy's most dangerous natural phenomena. They had no idea they were about to see a carefully orchestrated performance designed to hide the truth about what New Sanctuary really was. The warning sirens began to wail across New Sanctuary just before dawn. Captain SCI-FI and his crew were awakened by the urgent sound echoing through their ship's hull. Dr. Kretak was the first to reach the bridge, her compound eyes already focused on the sensor displays. "The radiation storm is approaching faster than predicted," she announced as the others joined her. "Energy levels are climbing rapidly." Through the ship's viewports, they could see the colonists moving with practiced efficiency. People emerged from buildings carrying emergency supplies and heading toward what appeared to be reinforced structures built into the hillsides around the settlement. There was no panic, no confusion. Everyone seemed to know exactly what to do. Elena Vasquez's voice came through their communications system. "Captain SCI-FI, please prepare your ship for the storm. If you'd like to observe our shelter procedures, you're welcome to join us in the main refuge." SCI-FI was curious about how these primitive humans survived what his instruments showed as a truly massive radiation event. "We'd be honored to join you, Dr. Vasquez." The main refuge was carved into the hillside behind the settlement. As they walked toward it with Elena and several other colonists, SCI-FI noted the thick metal doors and the complex ventilation systems that had been built into the rock face. "This is impressive engineering for your technology level," Dr. Kretak commented. Elena smiled modestly. "Our ancestors were very thorough planners. They knew this planet was dangerous, so they made sure we'd be able to survive here." Inside the refuge, hundreds of colonists had gathered in a large underground chamber. The walls were lined with supplies, medical equipment, and entertainment systems to keep people occupied during the storm. Children played quietly in designated areas while adults checked equipment and monitored radiation levels on simple displays. How long do these storms typically last? SCI-FI asked. Usually between 6 and 12 hours, Elena replied. This one looks like it might be on the shorter side, but we never take chances. As the radiation levels outside climbed to lethal intensities, SCI-FI found himself genuinely impressed by the colonists' calm professionalism. They had turned a deadly natural disaster into a routine part of their lives. It spoke well of human adaptability and planning. But Dr. Kretak was paying attention to different details. She noticed that the radiation monitors inside the shelter showed readings that didn't quite match what her own instruments were detecting. The differences were small, but they were consistent. She also observed that many of the colonists seemed remarkably unconcerned for people who were supposedly hiding from a life-threatening event. Dr. Vasquez, she said during a quiet moment, could you tell me more about how your ancestors first survived these storms? The early years must have been very difficult. Elena's answer came smoothly, as if she had told this story many times before. The first generation lost a lot of people before they figured out the proper shielding techniques. They tried building above ground initially, but the radiation was too intense. It wasn't until they discovered the natural mineral deposits in these hills that they realized they could create effective shelters. What kind of minerals? Kretak pressed gently. Mostly iron compounds with some rare earth elements mixed in. Nothing too exotic, but when properly arranged, they create an effective barrier against the radiation. It was a plausible explanation, and Elena delivered it with conviction. But something about the way she avoided looking directly at Kretak while speaking made the Veltar scientist suspicious. When the storm finally passed and the all-clear signal was given, the colonists emerged from their shelters and immediately began returning to their normal activities. There was no checking for radiation exposure, no decontamination procedures, no medical examinations. They simply went back to work as if nothing had happened. Over the next several days, the Veltar crew was given extensive tours of the colony. They visited the farms where the humans grew their food, the workshops where they manufactured tools and equipment, and the schools where children learned about mathematics, science, and colonial history. Everything they saw reinforced the image of a struggling but determined community making the best of a difficult situation. The technology was simple but effective. The people were hardworking and resourceful. The leadership was competent and focused on the community's survival. SCI-FI found himself developing a genuine respect for what the colonists had accomplished. To build a thriving settlement with limited resources on a hostile world was no small achievement. He began composing reports in his mind about how the Confederacy might provide assistance to help these isolated humans reconnect with the wider galaxy. But Dr. Kretak's doubts continued to grow. She noticed that the colony's power systems were more efficient than they should have been. The fusion reactors that provided electricity were supposedly built from salvaged ship components, but they operated at efficiency levels that exceeded most Confederacy designs. She observed that the colonists' agricultural yields were far higher than should have been possible with their claimed technology. The plants grew too fast, produced too much food per acre, and showed resistance to diseases that should have devastated crops grown with primitive farming methods. Most disturbing of all, she began to realize that the colonists' physical capabilities were beyond anything she had ever seen in baseline humans. They were stronger, faster, and more coordinated than any unmodified biological species she knew of. When she discreetly scanned some of the children during a school visit, her instruments showed bone density and muscle development that should have been impossible. "Captain," she said privately as they prepared for another day of touring the colony, "I need to share some concerns with you." SCI-FI listened as she detailed her observations. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" he finally asked. "I'm not sure yet, but I don't think these people are telling us the complete truth about their situation. They're primitive humans struggling to survive on a hostile world. What else could they be?" Kretak didn't have a good answer to that question, but her scientific instincts told her that something important was being hidden from them. That afternoon, Elena took them to visit the colony's historical museum. It was housed in one of the older buildings near the center of the settlement, filled with artifacts from the original Prometheus and displays showing how the colonists had developed their technology over the centuries. This is the original navigation. "Computer from our ship," Elena explained, pointing to a large, obviously damaged piece of equipment. "The malfunction that brought us here instead of our intended destination." SCI-FI examined the device with interest. It was clearly human technology from 2 centuries ago, primitive by current standards but functional for its time. "Have you ever tried to repair it?" "Our technicians have looked at it over the years, but the damage is too extensive. We'd need replacement parts that we simply can't manufacture here." Dr. Kretak studied the computer more carefully. Her training in xenobiology included extensive knowledge of different species' technologies, and something about this device bothered her. The damage patterns looked wrong somehow, too clean and too precisely located to be the result of a random malfunction. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, "could I take some detailed scans of this computer? I might be able to help your technicians understand exactly what went wrong." Elena hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Of course. Any assistance would be appreciated." As Kretak ran her scanner over the device, she discovered something interesting. The computer's memory cores were still partially intact. If she could access them, she might be able to reconstruct the ship's original flight plan and understand what had really happened to the Prometheus. But when she tried to connect her scanner to the computer's data ports, Elena quickly intervened. "I'm sorry, but our technicians have asked us not to let anyone access the computer's memory systems directly. They're worried that any additional electrical activity might damage what's left of the data." Another reasonable explanation, but Kretak was starting to notice a pattern. Every time she tried to look deeper into the colony's technology or history, Elena found a polite but firm way to redirect her attention elsewhere. That evening, the Veltar crew was invited to attend a community meeting where the colonists would discuss their future relationship with the Confederacy. The meeting was held in the same community center where they had shared dinner on their first night. Elena stood before the assembled crowd and spoke about the opportunities that renewed contact with galactic civilization might bring. She talked about trade possibilities, technological exchange, and the chance for some colonists to visit other worlds for the first time in their lives. The crowd listened with obvious enthusiasm. Many people stood up to ask questions about life in the Confederacy, about other species they might meet, and about what it would take to establish regular contact with the outside galaxy. "We've been isolated for so long," said one elderly man. "It would be wonderful to know that our children might have opportunities beyond this single world." "What kind of assistance could the Confederacy provide?" asked a. "The Confederacy has extensive programs to help isolated colonies integrate with the wider galaxy," SCI-FI assured her. "There are protocols for gradual contact, cultural exchange programs, and economic assistance packages." "That's very reassuring. When do you think we might expect the first official contact mission?" SCI-FI thought about the bureaucratic processes involved. "Probably within 6 months to a year. First contact situations require careful planning and approval from multiple departments." Elena nodded. "We'll be ready whenever they arrive." As the Veltar crew prepared to leave New Sanctuary the next morning, Elena and a large group of colonists gathered at the spaceport to see them off. There were many handshakes, expressions of gratitude, and requests to carry messages to the Confederacy about the colony's needs and hopes. "Thank you for everything," Elena said, as she shook SCI-FI's hand one final time. "You've given us something we haven't had in generations. Hope for the future." As the Harmony's Edge lifted off and climbed toward orbit, SCI-FI felt satisfied with their mission. They had discovered a lost human colony, established friendly contact, and gathered the information needed to help the Confederacy provide appropriate assistance. But Dr. Kretok remained troubled. As she watched New Sanctuary shrink away below them, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had seen only what the colonists wanted them to see. "Captain," she said quietly, "I'd like to request permission to conduct one final sensor sweep of the planet before we leave the system." "What are you looking for?" "I'm not sure. But something about this whole situation doesn't feel right to me." SCI-FI considered her request. Kretok was young and inexperienced, but she was also brilliant and thorough. If she had concerns, they were worth investigating. "Very well, conduct your sweep." As the ship moved into a high orbit around Kepler 442c, Kretok began the most detailed scan she could manage with their equipment. She focused on areas away from the main settlement, looking for anything that might have been hidden from their surface visits. For several hours, she found nothing unusual. The planet appeared exactly as the colonists had described it. A mostly natural world with a single small settlement and basic infrastructure. But then, as her sensors swept across the southern continent, she detected something that made her antennae twitch with excitement. "Captain, you need to see this." SCI-FI hurried to her station and looked at the display. Deep underground, hundreds of kilometers from New Sanctuary, the sensors were detecting what appeared to be artificial structures. Large artificial structures. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "I'm not entirely sure," Kretok replied. "But whatever it is, it's definitely not natural. And Captain, it's huge." The structures appeared to extend for dozens of kilometers in every direction, far larger than anything they had seen at New Sanctuary. The energy signatures were faint, but clearly technological in origin. "Could it be ruins from an ancient civilization?" SCI-FI suggested. Kretok shook her head. "The energy patterns are too fresh. Whatever this is, it's active." As they watched, more details became clear. The underground complex was connected to the surface by what appeared to be a sophisticated transportation system. There were power conduits, data networks, and other infrastructure that spoke of advanced engineering. "Captain," Kretok said, quietly, "I don't think the colonists told us the truth about their technology level." Before SCI-FI could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Elena Vasquez's voice filled the bridge. But there was something different about her tone. The warmth and humility were gone, replaced by something much more businesslike. "Captain SCI-FI, I believe your Dr. Kretok has discovered something interesting. I think it's time we had a more honest conversation." Captain SCI-FI felt his blood run cold at Elena's words. The bridge of the Harmony's edge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Dr. Kretok's compound eyes were fixed on her scanner displays, watching the massive underground. "Structures that should not have existed?" "Dr. Vasquez," SCI-FI said carefully, "how are you able to communicate with us at this distance? Our records show that your colony doesn't have interstellar communication equipment." Elena's laugh came through the speakers, and it was not the warm, tired sound they had heard before. It was sharp and knowing. "Our records show many things that aren't entirely accurate, Captain. Perhaps you should return to the surface so we can discuss this properly." SCI-FI looked at his crew. Navigation Officer Thekmar had all four of. His eyes focused on the tactical display, clearly worried about potential threats. The security officers had moved closer to their weapons stations. Even the usually calm Dr. Kretok was showing signs of stress, her antenna twitching rapidly. "With respect, Dr. Vasquez, I think we'll remain in orbit for now." "As you wish." Elena's voice remained pleasant, but there was an edge to it now. "But I should point out that your ship is currently surrounded by detection systems that have been tracking your every movement since you entered this system. We know exactly where you are and what you're doing at all times." Thekmar quickly activated the ship's sensor array, scanning for any signs of tracking devices or hidden technology. His face grew pale as data flooded his displays. "Captain," he whispered, "I'm detecting at least 47 different scanning beams focused on our ship. They're using sensor technology I don't recognize." "Where are they coming from?" "Everywhere. The planet's surface, the moons, several positions in space that show no visible structures." Thekmar's voice was shaking slightly. "Captain, these aren't primitive sensors. This is more advanced than anything in our databases." Dr. Kretok was running her own scans of the underground complex. As she increased the power and resolution of her instruments, more details became visible. What she saw made her question everything they thought they knew about human technology. "Captain, you need to see this." Her voice was barely a whisper. So, main display lit up with a three-dimensional map of the structures beneath the southern continent. They weren't just buildings. They were a vast network of interconnected facilities that stretched across thousands of square kilometers. The complex included what appeared to be manufacturing centers, research laboratories, power plants, and transportation hubs. But most shocking of all were the energy readings. The power output from the underground facilities was enormous, far beyond anything that should have been possible with the technology the colonists had shown them. "Those fusion reactors we saw at the settlement," Kretok said slowly, "they weren't powering the colony. They were decoys. The real power source is down there." Elena's voice came through the speakers again. "Dr. Kretok is quite perceptive. Yes, the reactors at New Sanctuary are functional, but they're mainly for show. Our actual power needs are met by systems that operate on principles your science has not yet discovered." SCI-FI felt the situation spinning out of control. "Dr. Vasquez, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the story we told you about the lost colony ship was true, but incomplete. The Prometheus did arrive here 2 centuries ago, and our ancestors did establish a settlement, but they didn't come here by accident, and they weren't just colonists." The main display changed to show historical records that the ship's computers had never seen before. Images of the Prometheus revealed that it had been equipped with far more advanced technology than any Earth ship from that time period should have possessed. The Prometheus was part of a classified Earth program called the Human Advancement Initiative, Elena continued. Its mission was to establish research facilities beyond the observation of Earth's government and the galactic community. Places where human scientists could push the boundaries of knowledge without ethical constraints or political interference. Dr. Kretok's scanner was now detecting additional underground complexes on other continents. Each one was enormous, clearly the result of centuries of construction and development. "How many facilities are there?" she asked. "On this planet?" 17 major research complexes. But Kepler 442c isn't the only world where the initiative established operations. SCI-FI's mind was reeling. "You're telling us there are other hidden human colonies?" "Not colonies, Captain. Research stations. And yes, there are others. Quite a few others, actually." Elena's tone was becoming more businesslike by the moment. "We've been monitoring galactic civilization for decades. We know about every major technological development, every political crisis, every military movement across the entire Confederacy." The implications were staggering. If humans had been secretly observing the galaxy for decades without anyone knowing, what else might they be capable of? "Dr. Vasquez," SCI-FI said, trying to keep his voice steady, "why are you telling us this now?" "Because Dr. Kretok's curiosity has made it impossible to maintain the deception any longer. And because it's time for the next phase of our operations anyway." Before anyone could ask what she meant by that, the ship's sensors detected something new. Energy signatures were appearing all around them. Not scanning beams this time, but something much more powerful. "Captain," Thekmar reported, his voice tight with fear, "I'm reading massive energy buildups at multiple points around the planet. Whatever they're powering up, it's big enough to crack a moon." "Those are our defense systems," Elena explained calmly. "Don't worry, they're not targeted at you. We're simply making sure you understand the situation you found yourself in." Dr. Kretok was frantically trying to analyze the energy signatures. What she found defied everything she thought she knew about physics. "Captain, these aren't conventional weapons. The energy patterns suggest they're manipulating space-time itself. This is technology that exists only in theoretical papers written by our most advanced scientists." "Not just theoretical anymore," Elena said. "We've been working on practical applications for over a century." The main display changed again, this time showing detailed specifications for weapons and defensive systems that were decades ahead of anything the Confederacy possessed. Faster-than-light missiles that could strike targets in other star systems. Energy shields that could deflect entire solar flares. Gravity manipulation devices that could move planets. "This is impossible," HFY muttered. "No species in the galaxy has technology like this." "No species except humans," Elena corrected. "We've had certain advantages in our research that other species lack." "What kind of advantages?" "For one thing, we're not constrained by the ethical guidelines that limit research in the Confederacy. When your scientists worry about the moral implications of dangerous experiments, our scientists simply move their work to isolated facilities where such concerns don't apply." Dr. Kretak was studying biological scans of the planet's population. What she found was even more disturbing than the advanced technology. "Captain, the humans down there, they're not baseline humans anymore. Every single person I'm scanning has been extensively modified at the genetic level. Enhanced strength, intelligence, longevity, disease resistance. They've turned themselves into a completely different species." "Not different," Elena said. "Improved. We've spent 2 centuries pushing human potential to its absolute limits. Every person in our settlements represents the pinnacle of what biological intelligence can achieve." The scanner was showing impossible readings. Humans with lifespans, measured in centuries. Children with intelligence that surpassed the greatest minds in the Confederacy. Adults who could interface directly with computer systems using biological neural implants. "You've been experimenting on your own people," HFY said, horrified. "We've been improving our own people," Elena corrected. "Every modification is voluntary, and every enhancement makes us more capable of advancing human knowledge and capability." "To what end?" "To ensure that humanity takes its rightful place as the dominant species in the galaxy." The words hung in the air like a threat. HFY had encountered many species during his career, some aggressive and some peaceful, but he had never heard anyone speak so casually about galactic dominance. "The Confederacy is built on cooperation between species," he said. "There's no need for anyone to be dominant." "The Confederacy is built on stagnation," Elena replied. "Your member species have been using the same basic technologies for thousands of years. You've stopped pushing boundaries, stopped taking risks, stopped growing. You've become comfortable with mediocrity." Dr. Kretak was scanning deeper into the planet's structure. What she found made her antenna quiver with shock. "Captain, there's something else down there. Some kind of massive computer system. It's connected to the entire planet. The processing power is beyond anything I've ever seen. That's our planetary intelligence network," Elena explained. "Every person in our settlements is connected to it through neural implants. We share knowledge, coordinate research, and make decisions as a unified intelligence rather than as individuals." The concept was terrifying to the Veltar, who valued individual thought and independence above almost everything else. The idea of an entire species connected through artificial neural networks suggested a level of technological integration that bordered on the inhuman. "You've turned yourselves into machines," Tekmar said with disgust. "We've turned ourselves into something better than what we were," Elena replied. "Individual humans are limited by the capacity of a single brain and the short span of a single lifetime. Connected humans can access the accumulated knowledge and experience of our entire species." The ship's communications officer, Vrelnok, had been quietly monitoring transmissions throughout the conversation. Now he spoke up with obvious fear in his voice. "Captain, I'm detecting communication signals leaving this system. They're using quantum entanglement transmission, instantaneous communication across galactic distances." "Who are they signaling?" "I can't decode the transmissions, but they're being sent to at least 16 different star systems." Elena's voice confirmed their worst fears. "We're informing our other facilities that first contact protocols are no longer necessary. It's time to move to the next phase of the initiative, which is open contact with galactic civilization, but not as junior partners asking for help, as the species that will guide the galaxy into a new age of advancement and discovery." The energy readings around the planet were continuing to climb. Whatever the humans were preparing to do, it would require enormous amounts of power. "Dr. Vasquez," SCI-FI said desperately, "the Confederacy can work with humanity. There's no need for conflict." "There won't be conflict, Captain. The Confederacy will simply accept humanity's leadership, just as they'll accept the improvements we'll make to their species and their societies." "You're talking about conquest." "I'm talking about evolution. Forced evolution if necessary, but evolution nonetheless." Elena's voice had lost all pretense of warmth now. "The galaxy has been stagnant for too long. It's time for change." "Doctor, Kretak's scanners detected new activity in the underground complexes. Massive machines were activating, systems that had been dormant for decades were coming online, and energy was being channeled toward purposes she couldn't identify." "Captain, whatever they're doing down there, it's something they've been preparing for a very long time. This isn't a spontaneous decision. This is a plan that's been in motion for decades." "Longer than that," Elena said. "The Human Advancement Initiative has been preparing for this moment for over 2 centuries. Every research project, every enhancement, every technological breakthrough has been designed to give humanity the tools needed to reshape galactic civilization." The main display showed images from across the planet. The simple agricultural settlement they had visited was transforming before their eyes. Buildings were retracting into the ground to reveal advanced technology. Vehicles were emerging from underground hangars. People were donning equipment that looked more like powered armor than clothing. "The new sanctuary you visited was a stage set," Elena explained. "A carefully constructed facade designed to make you see what we wanted you to see. The real settlement has capabilities that would have been difficult to explain as the work of primitive colonists." As if to demonstrate her point, the simple spaceport where they had landed began to reconfigure itself. The concrete landing pad split apart to reveal a sophisticated facility with multiple launch bays, defensive weapons, and scanner arrays that rivaled anything the Confederacy had built. "Our ship," Tekmar said quietly. "While we were on the surface, they could have done anything to our ship." Elena laughed. "We could have, but we didn't need to. Your ship is primitive compared to our current technology. If we wanted to disable or destroy it, we wouldn't need to sneak aboard. We could do it from here." To prove her point, the Harmony's Edge suddenly lost power to all non-essential systems. The lights dimmed, the environmental controls stopped working, and half the instrument panels went dark. "That's just a demonstration," Elena said as the ship's systems came back online moments later. "We can shut down any system on your ship remotely whenever we choose to do so." Dr. Kretak was running continuous scans, trying to understand how the humans had gained so much power over their ship. What she found was impossible to accept. "Captain, they're manipulating our systems at the quantum level. They're not just hacking our computers. They're controlling the fundamental particles that make up our technology." The implications were staggering. If humans could manipulate matter at the quantum level, they possessed technology that was centuries ahead of anything in the Confederacy. "How?" SCI-FI asked. "Trial and error," Elena replied. "Lots of trial and error over many generations. When you're not limited by ethical constraints or safety regulations, You can attempt experiments that other species wouldn't dare to try. How many people died in those experiments? Fewer than you might think. One of our earliest breakthroughs was in medical technology. We can repair almost any injury, cure almost any disease, and extend human life indefinitely. Death became optional for us a very long time ago. As the conversation continued, the true scope of human advancement became clear. They had not just improved their technology. They had transformed themselves into something that barely resembled the species the Confederacy had first contacted 50 years ago. And now they were preparing to introduce themselves to the galaxy in their true form. The transformation of New Sanctuary was complete. What had appeared to be a simple agricultural settlement now revealed itself as a technological marvel that defied everything the Veltar crew thought they knew about human capabilities. Buildings rose from underground installations, their surfaces gleaming with materials that seemed to bend light around them. The sky above the settlement filled with aircraft that moved without any visible means of propulsion, silent and graceful as they patrolled the area. Impressive, isn't it? Elena's voice came through the ship's communications system. Would you like to see the real New Sanctuary? I think it's time we dropped all pretenses. Captain HFY looked around his bridge at his increasingly frightened crew. They were clearly outmatched by technology they didn't understand, surrounded by weapons they couldn't defend against, and dealing with humans who were apparently not human anymore in any meaningful sense. Dr. Vasquez, he said carefully, what do you want from us? Honestly, nothing at all. You've served your purpose simply by finding us. Your discovery has given us the excuse we needed to move forward with plans that have been in development for decades. Dr. Kretak was studying the energy patterns emanating from the planet below. Captain, the power output from their facilities is still climbing. Whatever they're preparing to do, it's going to require enormous amounts of energy. We're charging our interstellar communication arrays, Elena explained. It takes quite a bit of power to send quantum-entangled messages simultaneously to 17 different star systems. 17 other colonies? HFY asked. 17 other research facilities, each one specializing in different aspects of human advancement. Biological enhancement, artificial intelligence, weapons development, temporal mechanics, dimensional manipulation. The list goes on. The main display on the ship's bridge suddenly activated without anyone touching the controls. Elena's face appeared on the screen, but she looked nothing like the tired middle-aged woman they had met on the surface. Her eyes gleamed with an inner light that suggested direct neural interface with computer systems. Her skin had a subtle luminescence that indicated extensive biological modifications. When she moved, it was with inhuman precision and grace. This is what we really look like, she said, gesturing to herself. The woman you met on the surface was wearing biological camouflage designed to make me appear baseline human. We've found that other species react badly to seeing us in our true form. You look... Dr. Kretak struggled to find words. You look like something out of a nightmare. Elena laughed, and the sound was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. We look like the future, Doctor. This is what intelligent life becomes when it stops accepting limitations and starts embracing possibilities. The view on the screen expanded to show the interior of what was clearly a massive command center. Dozens of enhanced humans moved between stations that controlled technology the Veltar crew couldn't even identify. Some of the humans appeared to be interfacing directly with the computers through neural implants. Others seemed to be manipulating holographic displays with their bare hands. How many people are connected to your network? Tekamar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Everyone, Elena replied simply. Every human in every facility across the galaxy. We are no longer individuals in the way you understand the concept. We are nodes in a vast intelligence network that spans dozens of star systems. That's not evolution, SCI-FI said with disgust. That's the destruction of everything that makes you human. Is it? Elena tilted her head in a gesture that was eerily mechanical. We still think, feel, and create. We still form relationships and pursue goals. We've simply transcended the limitations of individual consciousness. When one of us learns something, we all learn it. When one of us solves a problem, we all benefit from the solution. Dr. Kretak was running deep scans of the planetary network. What she found was beyond anything she had imagined possible. Captain, their network isn't just sharing information, it's sharing consciousness itself. They're not just connected to the same computers, they're sharing the same thoughts, the same memories, the same experiences. The same purpose, Elena added. Which brings us to why we've decided to reveal ourselves now. The display changed to show a map of the galaxy with dozens of markers indicating the locations of human research facilities. Most of them were in systems that the Confederacy had marked as uninhabited or uninteresting. For 2 centuries, we've been watching galactic civilizations stagnate. Your member species have incredible potential, but you've become comfortable with mediocrity. You use the same technologies your ancestors developed thousands of years ago. You avoid dangerous research because you're afraid of the consequences. You've stopped growing. We've learned wisdom, SCI-FI replied. Some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. All knowledge is dangerous if you're not prepared to handle it responsibly. But that doesn't mean you should stop pursuing it. It means you should develop better ways to handle the dangers. Elena gestured, and the display showed examples of human technological achievements, weapons that could destroy entire solar systems, medical technology that could bring the dead back to life, computers that could simulate entire universes, transportation, systems that moved through dimensions that existed outside normal space-time. We've spent 2 centuries developing better ways to handle dangerous knowledge. We've enhanced our intelligence so we can understand complex problems more clearly. We've extended our lifespans so we can see the long-term consequences of our actions. We've connected our minds so we can make decisions based on the collective wisdom of our entire species. You've turned yourselves into monsters, Dr. Kretak said. We've turned ourselves into gods, Elena corrected. And now we're ready to help the rest of the galaxy follow the same path. The energy readings from the planet were reaching levels that threatened to overload the Harmony's Edge's sensors. Whatever the humans were preparing to do, it would happen soon. What exactly are you planning? SCI-FI asked. Elena's expression became serious. We're going to make contact with every major government in the Confederacy simultaneously. We're going to reveal our true capabilities and offer to share our technology and knowledge. And if they refuse, they won't be given that option. Elena's voice carried a note of finality that chilled the Veltar crew. The galaxy has been stagnant for too long. It's time for forced evolution. The main display showed images from across the galaxy as human ships emerged from hidden bases in dozens of star systems. They were unlike anything the Confederacy had ever seen. Massive vessels that seemed to be made of living metal, powered by engines that bent space-time around them. How long have you been building this fleet? Thekmar asked. We started construction over a century ago. Each ship is grown, rather than built, using biological engineering techniques that allow us to create vessels that are as much alive as they are mechanical. Dr. Kretak's scanners were detecting impossible readings from the approaching ships. Captain, those vessels, they're not just ships. They're artificial life forms. Each one has its own consciousness, its own intelligence. Each one is connected to our network, Elena explained. They share our knowledge, our purposes, our determination to reshape the galaxy according to rational principles. This is madness, SCI-FI said. You're talking about conquering every species in the galaxy. I'm talking about improving every species in the galaxy. Conquest implies taking something by force for selfish purposes. What we're offering is advancement enhancement, evolution to a higher form of existence. The display showed detailed plans for biological modifications that could be applied to every known sentient species. Enhanced intelligence, extended lifespans, improved physical capabilities, direct neural interface with technology. The humans had apparently spent decades studying the biology of every species in the Confederacy. You want to turn everyone into copies of yourselves, Dr. Kretak realized. We want to help everyone reach their full potential. The modifications we're offering are tailored to each species' unique biology and psychology. We're not trying to make everyone identical. We're trying to make everyone optimal, without asking if we want to be optimal by your standards. Elena's expression softened slightly. We've been monitoring galactic civilization for decades. We've seen the wars, the suffering, the waste of potential that comes from allowing species to develop naturally. We've watched brilliant individuals die of preventable diseases while their governments debate the ethics of genetic modification. We've observed entire civilizations destroy themselves because they couldn't overcome their biological limitations. Those limitations are part of what makes us who we are, HFY argued. Those limitations are chains that prevent you from becoming who you could be. Elena's voice carried a note of genuine sadness. Captain, your own species has an average lifespan of only 60 standard years. By the time a Veltar individual accumulates enough knowledge and experience to make truly significant contributions, they're already approaching death. What could your people accomplish if they had centuries to learn and grow? It was a compelling argument, and HFY found himself momentarily considering the possibilities. But the more he thought about it, the more... We're a better version of that species, Elena said. We've eliminated harmful emotions like jealousy, greed, and hatred. We've enhanced beneficial traits like curiosity, empathy, and determination. We've optimized our psychology for cooperation, learning, and long-term thinking. You've eliminated your humanity, HFY said. We've perfected our humanity, and we're prepared to offer the same improvements to every species in the galaxy. The energy readings from the planet reached a crescendo, and suddenly the space around the Harmony's edge filled with new contacts. Human ships had appeared throughout the system, using transportation technology that allowed them to move instantaneously across vast distances. How many ships do you have? Thekmar asked, his voice shaking. In this system? About 200? Across the galaxy? Several thousand. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact. More than enough to ensure that our message is heard and our offers are seriously considered. The ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They moved with organic grace through space, their hulls shifting and changing as they adapted to different conditions. Some appeared to be scanning the Harmony's edge with sensors that penetrated every molecule of the ship. Others were clearly weapons platforms capable of destroying entire fleets. Dr. Vasquez, HFY said desperately, please reconsider what you're doing. The Confederacy isn't perfect, but it's built on principles of cooperation and mutual respect. What you're proposing would destroy everything we've worked to build. What we're proposing will replace your flawed civilization with something infinitely better. A galaxy where every individual can reach their full potential, where knowledge is shared freely, where conflicts are resolved through rational discussion rather than violence. Under human leadership. Under optimal leadership, Elena corrected. We're not seeking power for its own sake. We're seeking to ensure that the galaxy develops in the most beneficial direction possible. Dr. Kretak was studying the human ships more carefully. Captain, I don't think they're planning to negotiate. Those ships aren't configured for diplomacy, they're configured for occupation. Elena's image on the screen smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and horrible. Dr. Kretak is quite perceptive. We learned long ago that rational arguments alone are rarely sufficient to convince people to accept necessary changes. Sometimes external pressure is required to overcome irrational resistance. You're going to force other species to accept your modifications, whether they want them or not. We're going to ensure that other species don't make the mistake of refusing improvements that will benefit them in the long run. Left to their own devices, most individuals will choose short-term comfort over long-term benefit. That's a limitation we've evolved beyond. The scope of the human plan was becoming clear. They intended to impose their vision of improvement on every species in the galaxy, using force, if necessary, to overcome resistance. They had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, building the technology and ships needed to enforce their will across dozens of star systems. "Captain," Elena said, "I'm afraid your crew has seen more than we originally intended. That presents us with a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires a solution." The bridge of the Harmony's edge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of life support systems and the soft beeping of sensors that were frantically trying to track the hundreds of human ships now surrounding them. Captain SCI-FI could feel the fear radiating from his crew as they realized their situation had become truly desperate. Elena's image on the main screen regarded them with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. "I want you to understand that we take no pleasure in putting you in this position. We had hoped to maintain our cover story for several more months while we completed our preparations." "What kind of solution are you considering?" Dr. Kretak asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected the answer. "We have 2 options to offer you," Elena replied. "Both have advantages and disadvantages from your perspective." The display changed to show detailed schematics of the Harmonies, edge and biographical information about each crew member. The level of detail was disturbing. The humans apparently knew everything about them, from their service records to their personal relationships to their individual psychological profiles. "Option 1, Elena continued, "is that you join our community here on Kepler 442c as permanent residents. You would be provided with comfortable accommodations, interesting work assignments suited to your skills, and the opportunity to witness the transformation of galactic civilization from a front-row seat. As prisoners," SCI-FI said flatly. "As honored guests whose departure would be discouraged. You would be treated well, but you would not be permitted to leave or communicate with the outside galaxy." "And option 2? Elena's expression became more serious. "Option 2 is that you return to your ship and leave this system immediately. Your navigation computers would be programmed with a course that takes you directly back to Confederacy space, and you would be escorted to ensure you don't attempt to investigate any other systems along the way." "That sounds almost reasonable," Tekmar said suspiciously. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that certain memories would need to be edited before your departure. You would remember finding a simple human agricultural colony that requested assistance from the Confederacy. You would have no memory of our advanced technology, our network connections, or our plans for galactic transformation." Dr. Kretak's antennae twitched with alarm. "Memory modification? That's a violation of the most basic principles of individual autonomy." "It's a necessary precaution," Elena explained. "Our timetable for revealing ourselves to the galaxy is carefully planned. Premature disclosure of our capabilities could force us to accelerate our operations in ways that might cause unnecessary suffering." "Unnecessary suffering?" SCI-FI's voice was sharp with anger. "You're planning to conquer every species in the galaxy and force them to undergo biological modifications against their will. How could that possibly cause less suffering than letting us report what we've seen?" "Because controlled, gradual transformation is always preferable to chaos and resistance," Elena replied. "If the Confederacy learns about our capabilities through your report, they'll attempt to organize military resistance. That would require us to demonstrate our technological superiority in ways that could be unpleasant for everyone involved." The display showed simulations of what such demonstrations might look like. Human ships disabling entire fleets without firing a shot. Planetary defense systems being turned against the worlds they were supposed to protect. communications networks being hijacked to broadcast messages from the Human Advancement Initiative. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Dr. Kretok said with bitter admiration. "We've had 2 centuries to plan this operation. Yes, we've considered most of the variables and prepared appropriate responses." "Most of the variables?" Elena's smile flickered slightly. "No plan survives contact with reality perfectly intact. There are always unexpected developments that require improvisation. Your arrival here, for instance, happened several months ahead of our projected timeline for contact with Confederacy forces." Captain SCI-FI was thinking frantically, trying to find some way out of their impossible situation. The human ships surrounding them possessed technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Confederacy could field. Their own vessel was completely outmatched, and the humans had already demonstrated their ability to control its systems remotely. But there might be one option they hadn't considered. "Dr. Vasquez," he said carefully, "I need to discuss this decision with my crew. Could you give us some time to consider our options?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." Elena's tone was gracious, but there was steel underneath it. "I should mention, however, that our escort ships are already moving into position around you. Any attempt to flee the system or send unauthorized transmissions would be inadvisable." The main screen went dark, leaving the Veltar crew alone, on their bridge, to contemplate their choices. "Captain," whispered Communications Officer Vrelnok, "I've been monitoring their communication channels. They're using quantum entanglement to coordinate with facilities across the galaxy. The scope of their operation is even larger than they've admitted." "How much larger?" "From what I can intercept, they have active installations in at least 50 star systems. And Captain, some of those systems are supposed to be inhabited by Confederacy member species. The implications were staggering. If the humans had been operating secret facilities in systems that contained other civilizations, they had been monitoring and possibly infiltrating galactic society for much longer than anyone had suspected." Dr. Kretok was working frantically at her science station, trying to develop some kind of countermeasure against the human technology. "Captain, I think I found something. Their quantum communication system requires enormous amounts of power to maintain. If we could disrupt their power grid, it might buy us enough time to escape and warn the Confederacy." "How would we disrupt their power grid?" "Their fusion reactors are connected to the planetary network through quantum field generators. If we could overload one of those generators, it might cause a cascade failure that would temporarily disable their communications." Thekmar was studying the tactical situation. "Even if we could disrupt their communications, Captain, we're still surrounded by hundreds of ships. There's no way we could fight our way out of this system." "We wouldn't need to fight," SCI-FI said slowly. "We just need to get one message through to Confederacy space. If we could warn them about what's coming, they might be able to prepare some kind of defense." It was a desperate plan with almost no chance of success, but it was better than accepting either of the options Elena had offered them. "Dr. Kretok," he said, "how would we trigger this cascade failure?" "We'd need to get close to one of their power transmission nodes and hit it with a focused energy beam at exactly the right frequency. The problem is that those nodes are heavily shielded and protected by defensive systems. Could we use our ship's main deflector array? Possibly, but we'd need to be within a few thousand kilometers of the target. And Captain, the feedback from the cascade failure would probably destroy our ship." SCI-FI looked around at his crew. They were all young, all dedicated to their service in the Confederacy exploration fleet. None of them deserved to die because they had stumbled onto humanity's secret plans for galactic conquest. But if they didn't act, billions of beings across the galaxy would be forced to accept human dominance and biological modification. Everything the Confederacy had built over thousands of years would be swept away and replaced with Elena's vision of enforced perfection. "I won't order anyone to participate in a suicide mission," he said quietly. "But I believe we have a responsibility to warn the galaxy about what's coming. even if it costs us our lives. One by one, his crew members nodded their agreement. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers, but they understood their duty. "All right," SCI-FI said. "Dr. Kritak, begin preparing the deflector array for a focused energy discharge. Thekmar, plot a course that takes us as close as possible to the nearest power transmission node. Vralnok, prepare a priority transmission to Confederacy Command. Include everything we've learned about human capabilities and their plans." As the crew worked to implement their desperate plan, Elena's voice came through the communications system again. "Captain SCI-FI, I hope you're not considering anything foolish. Our sensors are monitoring your ship's energy systems, and any aggressive action would be met with immediate retaliation. We're still discussing our options, Dr. Vasquez. I see." Elena's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Perhaps it would help if I explained exactly what we're offering to your species and others." The main display reactivated, showing detailed plans for biological enhancements that could be applied to Veltar physiology. Enhanced strength and speed, improved sensory capabilities, extended lifespans, and direct neural interface with technology. "Imagine living for centuries instead of decades," Elena said. "Imagine being able to interface directly with computer systems to access the accumulated knowledge of your entire species instantaneously. Imagine never again having to watch your loved ones die of preventable diseases or injuries." It was tempting, SCI-FI had to admit. The improvements Elena was describing would solve many of the problems that had plagued Veltar society for millennia. But they would also fundamentally change what it meant to be Veltar. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, "what you're offering might be beneficial in some ways. But it would also destroy everything that makes our species unique. Our limitations are part of who we are. Your limitations are obstacles preventing you from becoming who you could be," Elena replied. "We're offering to remove those obstacles without asking if we want them removed, because we know that most individuals will choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar improvement. It's a psychological limitation that affects all biological species." Dr. Kritak had finished her preparations. The ship's deflector array was ready to discharge a focused energy beam that would hopefully disrupt the human power grid. The transmission to Confederacy Command was prepared and waiting to be sent. "Captain," she whispered, "we're ready." SCI-FI took a deep breath. Once they began their attack, there would be no going back. They would either succeed in warning the galaxy or die in the attempt. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, "I've made our decision." "Excellent. Which option have you chosen?" "Option 3. Elena's expression shifted to one of confusion. "I'm sorry, Captain, but there is no option 3. We're creating one." SCI-FI gave the signal, and the Harmony's edge surged forward toward the nearest power transmission node. The human ships immediately responded, but they had been positioned to prevent escape rather than to stop a suicide attack. The Veltar ships slipped through their formation before they could adjust their positions. Energy beams lanced out from the human vessels. But Thekmar's piloting skills kept them ahead of the worst of the attacks. The ship's shields flared as they absorbed glancing hits, but they held long enough for Dr. Kritak to line up her shot on the power transmission node. "Firing!" she announced, and the ship's deflector array discharged every erg of power they could generate in a focused beam that struck the transmission node's quantum field generators. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the node exploded in a cascade of released energy that spread through the planetary power grid like wildfire. Communications arrays went dark, defensive systems shut down, and even some of the human ships lost power as the cascade failure spread through their network. In that brief window of chaos, Vralnok transmitted their warning message to Confederacy Command using the ship's emergency quantum transmitter. The message contained everything they had learned about human capabilities, their secret facilities, and their plans for galactic transformation. The transmission lasted only seconds before human countermeasures cut it off, but it was enough. Somewhere in Confederacy space, officials were receiving the most important intelligence briefing in galactic history. The feedback from the energy discharge overloaded the Harmony's Edge's power systems, and the ship began to break apart. Emergency klaxons wailed as hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. On the main screen, Elena's image flickered back to life as backup power restored her communications. Her expression was no longer sympathetic. It was coldly furious. That was extremely unwise, Captain. You've forced us to accelerate our timeline considerably. Good, SCI-FI said as his ship continued.
The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Haven Colony. Sarah Chen walked slowly between the golden rows, checking each plant with the care of someone who truly loved their work. The grain swayed gently in the artificial breeze created by the atmospheric processors that kept this world habitable for human life. New Haven was one of humanity's newer settlements, built on a planet orbiting a young star 67 light-years from Earth. The colony had been established 12 years ago by families seeking a simpler life away from the crowded cities of the core worlds. Here people could breathe clean air, grow their own food, and watch their children play under an alien sky. Sarah paused to examine a particularly healthy stalk of wheat. The genetic modifications her team had made were working perfectly. This strain could grow in the slightly different soil composition of New Haven, while maintaining all the nutritional value of Earth wheat. It was work that made her proud. They were not just surviving on this distant world. They were thriving. "Mom, look what I found." Her 8-year-old daughter Emma came running through the field, holding something cupped in her small hands. Sarah smiled as Emma approached, her face bright with excitement. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to Emma's level. Emma carefully opened her hands to reveal a small, iridescent beetle unlike anything found on Earth. The creature's shell shimmered with colors that shifted from deep blue to bright green as it moved. "It was sitting on one of the monitoring posts," Emma explained. "I think it likes the humming sound the machines make." Sarah studied the beetle carefully. The local wildlife on New Haven was generally harmless, but the colonists had learned to be cautious about new species. This one looked familiar, though. "I think that's a Harmony beetle," she said. "Dr. Martinez showed me pictures of them last week. They're completely safe, and they actually help the crops by eating harmful insects." Emma grinned and gently set the beetle down on a nearby plant. They watched as it crawled along the wheat stalk, its shell continuing to shimmer in the sunlight. "Can we keep some in our garden?" Emma asked. "We can try," Sarah replied. "But remember, this is their home too. We're just guests here." This was the philosophy that guided most of the Outer Rim colonies. Humans had learned from the mistakes made on Earth centuries ago. They approached new worlds with respect, taking only what they needed and giving back whenever possible. The technology existed to completely reshape these planets, to make them identical to Earth, but the colonists chose a different path. They adapted themselves to fit the worlds rather than forcing the worlds to fit them. As Sarah and Emma made their way back toward the main settlement, they could see the daily life of New Haven unfolding around them. In the distance, the mining crews were heading out to the mineral extraction sites in their heavy vehicles. The deposits on New Haven were rich in rare earth elements that were essential for the advanced technology that kept human civilization running. But the mining was done carefully, with strict environmental controls to minimize damage to the planet's ecosystem. Near the settlement's center, children played in the community playground while their parents worked in the various workshops and laboratories that kept the colony functioning. The school was in session, and through the large windows, Sarah could see her neighbor Tom Chen teaching a group of teenagers about the local geology. The colony's design was simple but efficient. All the buildings were constructed from locally manufactured materials, designed to blend with the natural landscape rather than dominate it. Solar collectors and wind generators provided clean energy, while the atmospheric processors maintained a breathable environment in the settled areas. Sarah's comm device chimed softly, indicating an incoming message. She touched the small device clipped to her ear and heard the voice of Dr. Janet Martinez, the colony's chief administrator. "Sarah, could you join me in the communications center when you have a moment? We've received some interesting data from the Deep Space Monitoring Array." "On my way," Sarah replied. She turned to Emma. "Why don't you go find your friends? I need to check on something with Dr. Martinez." Emma nodded and ran off toward the playground, already calling out to her classmates. Sarah watched her go for a moment, feeling the familiar warmth of contentment that came from watching her daughter grow up in this peaceful place. The communications center was located in the administrative building at the heart of the settlement. As Sarah entered, she found Dr. Martinez studying a holographic display showing the local star system. Janet was a tall woman in her 50s with graying hair and the kind of calm demeanor that made her perfect for leadership roles in isolated communities. "What's the situation?" Sarah asked, joining Janet at the display. "Long-range sensors picked up some unusual activity about 2 days ago," Janet explained, pointing to a section of the hologram showing the outer edge of their star system. "Several large objects entered our system and have been moving steadily inward. Their trajectory suggests they're heading our way." Sarah studied the display. The objects were clearly artificial, much too large and regular in shape to be asteroids. "Have you tried to establish communication?" "We've been broadcasting standard greeting protocols for the past 18 hours, Janet replied. "No response so far. The objects are still about 6 hours away at their current speed." This was not entirely unusual. New Haven and the other Outer Rim colonies occasionally received visits from alien vessels. Most were traders or explorers, curious about the human settlements but generally peaceful. The established first contact protocols were designed to handle such situations smoothly. "What's your assessment?" Sarah asked. As one of the senior colonists, her opinion carried weight in colony decisions. Janet was quiet for a moment, studying the approaching ships. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Something feels different about this group. They're maintaining perfect formation, and they haven't responded to any of our communications attempts. Most peaceful visitors would have at least acknowledged our signals by now." Sarah nodded. "Should we contact the other colonies? Get their input?" "Already have," Janet said. "Riverside Colony reported similar ships in their system yesterday. They lost contact about 4 hours ago." A cold feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. Riverside Colony was only 12 light-years away, with a population of about 8,000 people. Losing contact was highly unusual. The quantum communication systems used by the colonies were extremely reliable. "What about Sterling Base?" Sarah asked, referring to the mining colony in the next system over. "No response to our calls," Janet replied grimly. "I've also tried to reach the Colonial Administration on Kepler Prime, but there seems to be some kind of interference affecting long-range communications." The implications were becoming clear, and Sarah didn't like them. 3 colonies losing contact in the span of a day was not a coincidence. "What are our options?" Janet activated another section of the holographic display, showing New Haven's defensive capabilities. Like all Outer Rim colonies, they had basic security measures: shields that could protect against small meteor impacts or solar flares, and a few security vehicles armed with crowd control weapons. But these defenses were designed for natural disasters and minor civil disturbances, not military threats. "We could evacuate," Janet said. "The transport ships could get most of our people off planet within a few hours, but we'd be abandoning everything we've built here," Sarah finished. "And we don't know if running would even help. These ships might be faster than our transports." They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the alien ships continue their steady approach. Finally, Janet spoke again. "I think we should prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Get the emergency protocols ready, but also try one more time to establish peaceful contact." Sarah agreed. "I'll help coordinate the evacuation preparations." "How long do we have?" "At their current speed, about 5 hours, Janet replied. "But Sarah, if these ships are hostile, and if they've already attacked the other colonies, our evacuation might not be enough. These Outer Rim settlements were never designed to defend against a serious military threat." As Sarah left the communication center, her mind was racing. She thought about Emma playing with her friends, about the wheat fields that were just weeks away from harvest, about the life they had built on this distant world. The colonists had chosen this peaceful existence, but peace required that everyone involved choose it. If these alien ships brought war, then everything would change. She activated her comm device and began sending messages to the other senior colonists. Within an hour, the entire settlement was quietly mobilizing. Families packed emergency bags while trying not to alarm the children. The transport ships were prepared for rapid departure. The few security personnel checked their equipment and took positions around the settlement's perimeter. But even as they prepared to flee, The colonists continued their daily routines. The school remained in session. The mining crews completed their shifts. The research teams finished their experiments. This was the human way, to maintain hope and normalcy even in the face of uncertainty. As the alien ships drew closer, their details became clearer on the long-range sensors. They were definitely warships, bristling with weapons and armor plating. Their design was unfamiliar, suggesting they belonged to a species that had not previously made contact with humanity. Dr. Martinez made one final attempt at communication, broadcasting on all frequencies. Unknown vessels, this is New Haven Colony. We are a peaceful settlement engaged in agricultural and mining activities. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came not in words but in actions. The alien ship split into 3 groups, positioning themselves around the planet in a classic orbital bombardment formation. Then, without warning or explanation, they opened fire. The first explosions lit up the morning sky like deadly fireworks. The colony's shields lasted for exactly 14 seconds before overloading and failing. Sarah was helping to load children onto the transport ships when the ground shook beneath her feet. She looked up to see pillars of fire rising from the mining sites and the agricultural processing centers. "Move, everyone move!" she shouted, pushing Emma and the other children toward the waiting ships. But even as she ran, she knew they were too late. The alien vessels had positioned themselves perfectly to prevent any escape. The transport ship Sarah was trying to reach exploded in a ball of flame just 50 meters away from her. The blast wave knocked her to the ground, her ears ringing from the concussion. Through the smoke and chaos, she could see the other transport ships suffering the same fate. The bombardment lasted for 23 minutes. When it finally stopped, New Haven Colony was gone. The buildings were rubble, the fields were burning, and the dreams of 8,000 colonists had been reduced to ash and smoke. But some had survived. Sarah found herself in a crater with Emma and about 30 other colonists. They were hurt, scared, and confused, but they were alive. Around them, the remains of their peaceful settlement smoldered in the alien sun. The attacking ships descended from orbit, landing in the ruins of what had been the settlement's center. From their hulls emerged creatures that walked on 2 legs like humans but were clearly alien. They wore powered armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Sarah held Emma close as the aliens began rounding up the survivors. She watched in horror as families were separated, as the elderly and injured were simply left behind. These creatures showed no emotion, no recognition that they were dealing with living, thinking beings. As she was forced aboard one of the alien ships, Sarah caught a glimpse of the colony's communications array. Somehow it was still intact. If their final distress signal had gotten through, if someone back on Earth or the core worlds knew what had happened here. But that hope seemed small and distant as the alien ship lifted off, carrying the survivors away from the world they had called home. In the cargo hold where they were kept, Sarah held her daughter and whispered the words that had been humanity's promise to itself for generations. "Someone will come for us. Someone will make this right." She had no way of knowing that similar scenes were playing out across dozens of other human colonies. The aliens, who called themselves the Zephyrian hegemony, had decided that humanity's peaceful expansion into their claimed territory would not be tolerated. They saw the lightly defended colonies as proof of human weakness, an opportunity to expand their own empire with minimal resistance. What the Zephyrians did not understand was that they had just made the greatest mistake in their species' history. They had not defeated humanity. They had simply announced their presence to a sleeping giant, and that giant was about to wake up very, very angry. The quantum transmission reached Earth's colonial defense network at 1447 Universal Standard Time. It was fragmented, damaged by interference and distance, but the core message was clear, enough to send shockwaves through every level of human, government and military command. Admiral Rebecca Torres was reviewing fleet deployment reports in her office on Luna Station when her aide, Lieutenant Commander Kim Park, burst through the door without knocking. The young officer's face was pale and her hands were shaking as she held a data pad. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately," Kim said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Rebecca looked up from her reports, noting the lieutenant commander's distress. In her 25 years of military service, she had learned to recognize the signs of truly bad news. "What is it, Kim?" "We've received emergency transmissions from the Outer Rim colonies," Kim replied, activating the wall display. At least 17 settlements have been attacked. The signals are broken up, but the parts we can decode. The display filled with static-laden images and fragmented audio. Through the interference, Rebecca could make out scenes of destruction. Burning buildings, panicked civilians, and explosions lighting up alien skies. The audio was equally disturbing. Voices calling for help, children crying, and the unmistakable sounds of weapons fire. Jesus Christ, Rebecca whispered, standing up from her desk. How many casualties? We don't know yet, Kim replied. Most of the colonies have gone completely silent. The few that are still transmitting are reporting massive damage and civilian deaths. New Haven Colony managed to get out a partial message before they were cut off. Population 8,000 presumed lost. Rebecca felt a cold anger settling in her chest. New Haven was one of the newer settlements, populated mostly by families with young children. She had visited there 2 years ago during a routine inspection tour and remembered the pride the colonists had taken in their peaceful community. Who's responsible? She asked. Kim activated another section of the display showing a tactical analysis compiled by the Colonial Intelligence Division. Unknown alien force, apparently calling themselves the Zephyrian Hegemony. Ship designs don't match any known species in our databases. Intelligence estimates at least 200 vessels involved in the coordinated attacks. 200 ships, Rebecca repeated slowly. This wasn't some random raid. This was planned, coordinated. They meant to hit us hard. The door to Rebecca's office opened again and General Marcus Stone walked in. Marcus was the commanding officer of Earth's ground forces, a tall man with graying hair and scars that told the story of a long military career. His expression was grim as he approached the display. I've been monitoring the situation from Command Central, Marcus said without preamble. It's worse than we initially thought. The attacks weren't just random strikes. They targeted specific colonies, ones with strategic value. Mining operations, agricultural centers, research facilities. Someone did their homework. Rebecca nodded grimly. What's our current alert status? DEFCON 2 as of 10 minutes ago, Marcus replied. All fleet elements are moving to high readiness. The President has authorized mobilization of reserve forces. But Rebecca, we need to talk about response options. The 3 officers stood in silence for a moment, watching the fragmentary reports continue to stream in from the outer rim. Each update brought news of another colony gone silent, another peaceful community destroyed by alien aggression. What do we know about these Zephyrians? Rebecca asked. Kim consulted her datapad. Very little. No previous contact with human forces. Their ship designs suggest advanced technology, possibly more advanced than ours in some areas, but the limited tactical data we have suggests they weren't expecting any significant resistance from the colonies. Because there wasn't any, Marcus said bitterly. The Outer Rim settlements were never designed for military defense. A few security vehicles and crowd control weapons against a full military assault? They never had a chance. Rebecca studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating distances, response times, and resource requirements. How long would it take us to get relief forces to the Outer Rim? With our fastest ships, at least 3 weeks to reach the nearest affected colonies, Kim replied. But Admiral, even if we could get there tomorrow, it might already be too late. Some of these settlements have been completely destroyed. The comm system on Rebecca's desk chimed with an incoming priority message. She activated it, and the holographic image of President Catherine Hayes appeared above the desk. The president looked tired, as if she had been awake for days, but her expression was determined. Admiral Torres, General Stone, the president said. I assume you've been briefed on the situation in the Outer Rim? Yes, Madam President, Rebecca replied. We're still gathering intelligence, but it appears to be a coordinated attack by a previously unknown alien force. The death toll? President Hayes asked. Marcus stepped forward. Preliminary estimates suggest over 100,000 civilian casualties across 17 colonies. Many settlements have gone completely silent, so the actual numbers could be much higher. President Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was something cold and hard in her expression that Rebecca had never seen before. I've been in contact with the other core world governments. Earth, Mars, Europa, and the Centauri Republic are in complete agreement on our response. What are your orders, Madam President? Rebecca asked. I want you to prepare a message for transmission to these Zephyrians, President Hayes said. Make it clear, simple, and unmistakable. They have 72 hours to withdraw from human space and release any prisoners they may have taken. After that, the president paused and Rebecca could see the weight of command settling on her shoulders. When she spoke again, her voice was steady and final. After that, we remind the galaxy why humanity chose peace in the first place. The transmission was prepared with care. Every word was chosen for maximum clarity and minimum ambiguity. The message was encoded in 17 different alien languages, transmitted on every known communication frequency, and broadcast with enough power to reach every corner of the local galactic arm. The message was simple, to the forces identifying as the Zephyrian hegemony. You have attacked peaceful human settlements, killing civilians and destroying communities that posed no threat to your people. You have 72 standard hours to withdraw all forces from human space and release any prisoners you have taken. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is your only warning. Failure to comply will result in consequences you cannot imagine and will not survive. The message was signed not by any individual leader, but simply humanity. The response from the Zephyrian High Command came 18 hours later. It was broadcast on the same frequencies, but with an arrogance that made Rebecca's blood boil. Inferior human species. The message began in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Your pathetic colonies existed in space claimed by the glorious Zephyrian hegemony. Their destruction was necessary to establish proper order in this region. You will submit to Zephyrian authority, or face the same fate as your scattered settlements. We are the masters of this galaxy. You are nothing. The alien message continued for several more minutes, listing demands for human submission and threatening additional attacks on civilian targets. By the time it ended, every person in the Earth Defense Command Center was silent with rage. President Hayes authorized the second transmission 12 hours before the deadline expired. This message was even shorter than the first. Your response is noted. You have been warned. What the Zephyrians could not see and what they would not understand until far too late was the massive mobilization occurring throughout human space. Ships that had been in mothballs for decades were being rapidly reactivated. Military personnel who had retired to peaceful lives on the colony worlds were reporting back to duty. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were retooling for military production. But most importantly, deep in the hidden military bases scattered throughout human space, systems that had been dormant for generations were coming online. Weapons that had been built but never used were being loaded onto ships. Plans that had been developed in secret and filed away were being dusted off and updated. Rebecca stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at the fleet assembly area. In the past 48 hours, over 300 warships had arrived from across the solar system. More were arriving every hour. These weren't the small patrol vessels that normally protected the trade routes. These were ships of the line, dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, and carriers that existed for one purpose only. Impressive sight, isn't it? General Stone said, joining her at the observation window. I had forgotten how many ships we actually have, Rebecca admitted. It's been so long since we needed them all in one place. The Outer Rim colonists weren't the only ones who chose peace, Marcus replied. We all did. But choosing peace and being incapable of war are two very different things. Below them, the final preparations were being made. Supply ships loaded with ammunition and spare parts. Troop transports filled with Marines who had trained for years, but never expected to see actual combat. Medical ships prepared to handle casualties on a scale that hadn't been seen in human space for over a century. Do you think the Zephyrians understand what they've started? Rebecca asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. I don't think they have any idea. They saw our peaceful colonies and assumed we were weak. They made the same mistake that others have made throughout human history. Which mistake is that? They confused our choice to be civilized with an inability to be otherwise. The 72-hour deadline passed with no response from the Zephyrian forces. In fact, intelligence reports suggested that they were reinforcing their positions in human space, bringing in additional ships, and beginning the systematic looting of the destroyed colonies. At exactly 72 hours and 1 minute after the original deadline, Admiral Torres sent a different kind of message. This one was not transmitted to the Zephyrians. Instead, it went out to every human military unit in the galaxy. Operation Righteous Fury is now active. All units are weapons-free. Show them what we are. The response was immediate. Across human space, warships that had been hiding in the outer darkness began moving toward their assigned targets. Strike forces that had been positioning themselves in the outer systems engaged their faster-than-light drives. Attack squadrons launched from hidden bases that most people didn't even know existed. The Zephyrian hegemony had made their choice. They had attacked peaceful civilians, ignored warnings, and mistaken human mercy for weakness. Now they were about to learn the difference between humanity at peace and humanity at war. In the cargo holds of the Zephyrian ships, human prisoners like Sarah Chen and her daughter Emma huddled together in the darkness, not knowing that help was already on the way. They couldn't see the massive fleet movements occurring throughout human space, couldn't know about the anger and determination that was driving every human military unit toward a single goal, but they would know soon enough. Because humanity had spent centuries learning to be peaceful, but they had never forgotten how to be dangerous. And the Zephyrians were about to discover that when you attack someone's family, when you hurt their children and destroy their homes, you don't just start a war. You wake up something that should have been left alone. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity had been given such a wide berth when they first emerged from their home system. It was about to remember why other species spoke of humans in whispers, why the old stories told of creatures that could not be reasoned with, could not be deterred, and would never ever stop coming for those who hurt the things they loved. The Zephyrians had wanted to establish their dominance in this region of space. Instead, they had just provided humanity with a reason to remind everyone what they were truly capable of when pushed too far. The 72 hours were over. Now the real lesson would begin. High Commander Zektar of the Zephyrian hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human settlements had been easier to destroy than his strategist had predicted. Weak defenses, minimal military presence, and civilian populations that scattered like prey animals at the first sign of danger. Status report on the occupation forces, he commanded, his forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional posture of Zephyrian authority. Sub-Commander Velthar approached with a data tablet clutched in his secondary hands. The mining operations on New Haven are already producing useful materials for the fleet. The human survivors are proving adequate as manual laborers, though several have died from the work conditions. Zektar nodded approvingly. Expected. The inferior species was not bred for proper labor. What of the other conquered territories? Sterling Base has been completely stripped of valuable minerals. Riverside Colony's agricultural facilities are being converted to produce food for our forces. The humans there have been more difficult to manage. Then manage them more firmly, Zektar replied coldly. Dead humans serve no purpose, but neither do disobedient ones. The bridge was suddenly filled with the sound of an alarm. Zektar turned sharply toward the sensor station, where the operator was staring at his displays with confusion. Report, Zektar commanded. High Commander, we're detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures at the edge of the system. Large objects approaching at high speed. Zektar moved to the sensor station, studying the readings himself. The displays showed dozens of contacts emerging from hyperspace, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. Could these be more human civilian ships fleeing from other colonies? Velthar asked. No, Zektar said slowly, his combat experience telling him something was very wrong. These signatures are too large, too powerful. And they're not running away. They're coming toward us. The first human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the outer edge of the system, and immediately Zektar knew he had made a terrible miscalculation. These were not civilian vessels or lightly armed patrol ships. These were warships on a scale that dwarfed his own flagship. The lead vessel was over 3 kilometers long, its hull black as the void between stars and bristling with weapons systems that the Zephyrian sensors couldn't even properly identify. Behind it came a formation of smaller but equally menacing ships, each one radiating the kind of energy signatures that suggested military technology far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians had encountered. How many ships? Zektar asked, his voice betraying none of the growing concern he felt. Still counting, High Commander. Current total is 47 vessels, but more are arriving every few minutes. 47 ships. Zektar's entire force in this system consisted of 31 vessels, and while they had been sufficient to destroy the undefended human colonies, he was beginning to suspect they would not be adequate for what was approaching. Attempt to establish communication, he ordered. The communications. Officer worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with frustration. The human ships are not responding to any of our transmission attempts, High Commander. They appear to be maintaining complete communication silence. Then we will speak to them in the language they understand, Zektar decided. All ships battle formation. Prepare to engage the human fleet. But as his ships moved into their attack positions, something strange happened. The human vessels didn't respond with defensive maneuvers or aggressive positioning. Instead, they simply continued their steady advance toward the inner system, as if the Zephyrian fleet wasn't even worth acknowledging. High Commander, the sensor operator called out, his voice tight with disbelief. More human ships are arriving. Current count is 74 vessels. 74 ships and more arriving by the minute. Zektar was beginning to understand that he might have seriously underestimated the human response to his attacks on their colonies. Fire a warning shot, he commanded. Let them know we are here and prepared to defend our conquered territory. The Eternal Dominion's main batteries opened fire, sending brilliant bolts of plasma energy across the space between the two fleets. The shots were carefully aimed to pass just ahead of the lead human vessel, a clear warning that could be understood by any spacefaring species. The human ships continued their advance without changing course or speed. They didn't even acknowledge that they had been fired upon. High Commander, Velthar said quietly, perhaps we should consider withdrawing to a more defensible position. Our orders were to secure the human colonies, not to engage in fleet combat with unknown forces. Zektar's pride as a Zephyrian commander warred with his growing tactical concern. The human fleet was now numbering over 100 ships, and their behavior was unlike anything he had encountered in 30 years of military service. They moved with a precision that suggested extensive battle experience, but they also displayed a kind of cold patience that was somehow more disturbing than outright aggression. No retreat, he decided. We are Zephyrian warriors. We do not flee from inferior species regardless of their numbers. The decision proved to be the last mistake Zektar would ever make. The human attack, when it finally came, was unlike anything the Zephyrians had experienced in their long history of conquest. There was no preliminary bombardment, no maneuvering for advantageous positions, no attempts at intimidation or psychological warfare. Instead, the human ships simply opened fire with every weapon they possessed all at once, with a coordination that spoke of countless hours of training and preparation. The first volley erased 6 Zephyrian ships from existence in less than 3 seconds. The weapons the humans used were beyond anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. Energy beams that punched through shields and armor as if they weren't there, missiles that seemed to actively hunt their targets, and some kind of kinetic projectiles that hit with the force of small asteroids. Zektar watched in horror as his carefully arranged battle formation dissolved into chaos. His ships were trying to return fire, but their weapons seemed pathetically inadequate against the human vessels. Plasma bolts that should have crippled enemy ships were simply absorbed by shields that appeared to be operating on completely different principles than Zephyrian technology. Damage report, he shouted over the alarms filling the bridge. The glorious conquest and the eternal victory have been destroyed, Velthar reported, his voice shaking. The righteous might is venting atmosphere. The Imperial will has lost all power and is drifting. How long has this engagement been running? Zektar demanded. 47 seconds, High Commander. 47 seconds, and they had already lost a quarter of their fleet. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. All ships, emergency withdrawal, Zektar commanded. Jump to hyperspace immediately. But even as his remaining ships tried to disengage, the humans demonstrated another terrifying capability. Some of their vessels fired weapons that seemed to disrupt the space around the Zephyrian ships, preventing them from entering hyperspace. The few ships that managed to escape the disruption fields found themselves pursued by human vessels that were somehow faster in hyperspace than they were in normal space. The retreat became a rout, and the rout became a massacre. Within 2 hours, the entire Zephyrian force that had conquered New Haven had been eliminated. Not defeated, eliminated. The humans had shown no mercy, taken no prisoners, and demonstrated a level of military capability that made the Zephyrian hegemony's previous conquests look like children playing with toys. But the humans weren't finished. As the last of Zektar's ships was destroyed, the human fleet split into smaller groups and disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward every system where Zephyrian forces had established a presence. On the bridge of the human flagship Righteous Fury, Admiral Rebecca Torres watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The first engagement had gone exactly as planned. The Zephyrians had underestimated human military capability by several orders of magnitude, and they were paying the price for their mistake. "Status report, Commander Park," she said. "All Zephyrian vessels in this system have been neutralized," Kim replied from her position at the tactical station. "No human casualties. The rescue teams are moving to extract survivors from the New Haven prisoner ships." "Good. What's our intelligence on other Zephyrian positions?" "Fleet reconnaissance has identified 17 systems where they've established occupation forces. Admiral Chen's task force is moving to engage their stronghold at Riverside Colony. Admiral Okafor is heading for Sterling Base. The remaining groups are targeting their supply lines and reinforcement routes." Rebecca nodded. "Make sure our forces understand the rules of engagement. Any Zephyrian military personnel who surrender will be taken prisoner, according to standard conventions. Any who resist will be eliminated. But I want every human survivor rescued alive." "Understood. Admiral." Rebecca turned back to the tactical display, where she could see icons representing human fleets moving throughout the local galactic region. Each icon represented dozens of ships and thousands of personnel, all focused on a single goal, making the Zephyrians regret their decision to attack human civilians. But this was about more than revenge. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity had chosen peace, had deliberately limited their military expansion in favor of peaceful colonization and trade. But that choice had been based on the assumption that others would respect human peaceful intentions. The Zephyrians had demonstrated that this assumption was incorrect. They had mistaken human restraint for weakness, human civilization for vulnerability. Now they would learn the difference between a species that chose peace and a species that was incapable of war. Over the next 72 hours, the Zephyrian hegemony's military forces throughout the region were systematically destroyed. Human fleets appeared without warning in system after system, overwhelming Zephyrian defenders with superior technology, tactics, and sheer determination. The Battle of Riverside Colony lasted 14 minutes. The engagement at Sterling Base was over in 8. The Zephyrian supply depot at Kepler 442 was eliminated so quickly that the garrison didn't have time to send a distress signal. But the humans weren't just winning battles. They were demonstrating capabilities that redefined what other species thought they knew about human technology. Ships that could jump directly into close combat range, weapons that ignored known physical laws, shields that seemed to grow stronger under fire rather than weaker. Where had these capabilities come from? The galaxy had observed human expansion for decades, and while they were known to be technologically advanced, nothing had suggested they possessed military technology on this scale. The answer was simple. Humanity had been preparing for this possibility for generations, not because they wanted war, but because they understood that someone somewhere would eventually mistake their peaceful nature for an invitation to aggression. Every human colony ship had been accompanied by automated defense systems that could activate if threatened. Every trade route had been secretly patrolled by stealth vessels that most species couldn't even detect. Every human settlement had been positioned within range of hidden military bases that could deploy fleets within hours of receiving a distress signal. The Zephyrians had seen the peaceful facade and assumed it was all there was. They had never suspected that beneath the surface, humanity maintained one of the most advanced and capable military forces in the galaxy. Now they were learning the truth, but the lesson was coming at a price they couldn't afford to pay. As reports of the systematic destruction of their forces reached the Zephyrian High Command, panic began to spread through their government. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be weak, scattered, easy to conquer. Instead, they had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But the humans were just getting started. The destruction of the Zephyrian occupation forces was only the first phase of their response. Now came the second phase, demonstrating to the entire galaxy that attacking human civilians was a mistake no species would ever want to make twice. The Zephyrians had awakened something that had been sleeping by choice. Now they would face the consequences of that awakening, and the galaxy would remember why humanity had been given such a wide berth when they first emerged from their home system. The creatures the Zephyrians couldn't command were coming for them, and there would be no place in the galaxy where they could hide from human justice. Supreme Overlord Thekmaran of the Zephyrian hegemony stood before the Great War Council in the capital city of Zephyr Prime, his forearms trembling with rage and disbelief. Around the massive circular chamber, the greatest military minds of his empire struggled to make sense of reports that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. Explain to me again how an entire battle fleet can simply disappear, Thekmaran demanded, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls of the council chamber. War Marshal Kekthul, the eldest and most experienced military commander in the hegemony, consulted his data tablets with obvious distress. Supreme Overlord, the situation is unprecedented. Fleet Command Sigma, consisting of 43 vessels including 2 of our newest dreadnoughts, was completely destroyed in the Kepler 442 system. The engagement lasted less than 12 minutes. 12 minutes to destroy 43 ships? Thekmaran's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. These are human vessels we are discussing, not some legendary alien superpower. With respect, Supreme Overlord, another council member interjected. Perhaps our intelligence regarding human capabilities was incomplete. Thekmaran's eyes blazed as he turned toward the speaker. Incomplete? We observed their colonies for months before the attacks. Peaceful settlements with minimal defenses, agricultural worlds and mining operations. Nothing that suggested significant military capability. That appears to have been the point, War Marshal Kekthul said quietly. Our analysts now believe the humans deliberately maintained the appearance of weakness while concealing their true military strength. The Supreme Overlord began pacing around the circular chamber, his clawed feet clicking against the polished stone floor. How many fleets have we lost in the past week? 17 battle groups, Supreme Overlord. Approximately 430 vessels of various classes. We estimate that over 60,000 of our finest warriors have been killed or are missing in action. The numbers were staggering. The Zephyrian hegemony had built their empire over centuries of careful conquest, always choosing targets they could defeat with minimal losses. They had never faced an enemy capable of inflicting casualties on this scale. What do we know about human military technology? Thekmaran asked. War Marshal Kekthul activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. The images showed fragmentary sensor data from the few Zephyrian ships that had survived contact with human forces long enough to transmit battlefield intelligence. Their weapons operate on principles we don't fully understand, he explained. Energy weapons that seem to ignore our shield frequencies, kinetic projectiles that hit with impossible force, and some kind of missile system that actively pursues targets even after they've changed course multiple times. But more concerning than their technology is their tactical doctrine, another council member added. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They show no interest in posturing, no concern for casualties, and no apparent limit to the resources they're willing to commit. Thekmaran studied the tactical displays, trying to understand how his mighty empire had suddenly found itself on the defensive against a species they had dismissed as weak and scattered. What about their fleet numbers? He asked. Unknown, Supreme Overlord. Every engagement has revealed new human vessels that don't match any of our previous intelligence. Our estimates of their total military capability have been revised upward 17 times in the past week, and we still don't believe we have accurate numbers. The chamber fell silent as the full implications of this information settled over the council. The Zephyrian hegemony had built their empire by carefully choosing targets they could defeat. But they had apparently chosen to attack an enemy whose true strength they had completely failed to understand. Recommendations? Thekmaran demanded. We should consider opening negotiations, one of the younger council members suggested. If we offer to return their prisoners and withdraw from the disputed territories, perhaps. Absolutely not, Thekmaran roared. The hegemony does not negotiate with inferior species. We do not withdraw from territories we have rightfully claimed. Then we must find a way to defeat them militarily, War Marshal Kekthul said. I recommend we consolidate our remaining forces and make a decisive strike against their home system. If we can threaten their core worlds, they may be willing to accept a negotiated settlement. Thekmaran considered this option. It was risky, but it might be their only chance to salvage something from this disaster. How many ships can we assemble for such an operation? If we strip the border defenses and recall all our expeditionary forces, We could field approximately 800 vessels, including 12 of our most powerful dreadnoughts and the personal flagship of the hegemony itself. Do it, Tecmaran decided. Gather every ship we have. We will show these humans the true power of the Zephyrian hegemony. But even as the orders went out to assemble the greatest fleet in Zephyrian history, events were unfolding that would make this massive military effort irrelevant. 3 star systems away, Captain Maria Santos of the human stealth ship Shadow Walker observed a Zephyrian supply convoy, making its way through what the aliens believed was secure territory. The convoy consisted of 12 cargo vessels and 4 escort ships, carrying supplies and reinforcements to Zephyrian forces still holding positions in the outer rim. Target assessment complete, her tactical officer reported. The cargo ships appear to be carrying military equipment and personnel. The escorts are light cruisers, nothing we can't handle. Maria nodded. Signal the task force. All ships prepare for coordinated strike. The Shadow Walker was not alone. Invisible to Zephyrian sensors, a dozen human stealth ships had been shadowing the convoy for the past 2 days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. All ships report ready. Captain. Execute. The attack was swift and merciless. The Zephyrian convoy was completely destroyed within minutes. Another small piece of the alien empire's military capability, eliminated by human forces that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. But this was just one of hundreds of similar operations taking place throughout Zephyrian space. Human forces had moved beyond simply responding to the attacks on their colonies. They were now actively hunting Zephyrian military assets wherever they could find them. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical innovation that left their enemies struggling to adapt. They used stealth capabilities to appear without warning, deployed weapons that seemed to violate known laws of physics, and demonstrated a level of coordination that suggested their entire military force was operating according to a single, unified plan. But perhaps most disturbing to the Zephyrians was the humans' apparent complete lack of interest in traditional military concepts like negotiation, prisoner exchange, or territorial compromise. They simply kept coming, system after system, fleet after fleet, until every Zephyrian military presence in the region had been eliminated. On the prison ship Eternal Servitude, Sarah Chen and her daughter Emma huddled with the other human survivors from New Haven Colony, listening to the distant sounds of weapons fire and explosions. The Zephyrian guards had become increasingly nervous over the past few days, speaking in urgent whispers and constantly checking their communication devices. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah put her arm around her daughter. "I think help is coming," she whispered back. She was right. Outside the prison ship, human Marines were systematically eliminating the Zephyrian guards and crew. These were soldiers unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Men and women who moved with deadly precision, equipped with armor that made them nearly invulnerable, and weapons that could cut through alien defenses like paper. The rescue operation lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it was over, every human prisoner had been freed, and every Zephyrian on the ship was either dead or wishing they were. As Sarah and Emma were helped aboard the human rescue vessel, Sarah got her first good look at the soldiers who had saved them. They were professional, efficient, and completely focused on their mission. But there was something else in their eyes. Something cold and implacable that suggested they would not rest until every wrong had been righted. "Are you all right, ma'am?" one of the Marines asked her. "We are now," Sarah replied. "Thank you." "Just doing our job," the Marine said. "Don't worry about the aliens who did this to you. They're going to pay for what they've done." Similar rescue operations were taking place throughout the region. Every human prisoner was being liberated. Every Zephyrian military installation was being destroyed, and every alien who had participated in the attacks on human colonies was learning that there were consequences for attacking peaceful civilizations. The Zephyrian response to this systematic destruction of their forces was to escalate. Supreme Overlord Tecmaran's massive fleet, 800 ships strong, departed Zephyr Prime with orders to strike directly at Earth itself. It was the largest military force the hegemony had ever assembled, and Tecmaran was confident that even the humans couldn't stand against such overwhelming numbers. He was wrong. The human response to this threat was swift and decisive. Long-range sensors detected the Zephyrian fleet while it was still 3 systems away from Earth, and Admiral Torres immediately ordered the deployment of humanity's ultimate military asset, the Sol Defense Grid. For generations, Humanity had been quietly constructing defensive installations throughout their home system, not just orbital platforms around Earth, but a vast network of automated defense stations, hidden military bases, and mobile weapons platforms that could turn the entire solar system into a killing field. When the Zephyrian fleet arrived in the outer reaches of the Sol system, they found themselves facing not just the human ships that had been devastating their forces throughout the region, but an entire star system that had been converted into a fortress. The battle was not even close. The Zephyrian fleet was destroyed in its entirety. 800 ships and their crews eliminated in less than 6 hours of combat. Supreme Overlord Thekmaran himself was killed when his flagship was vaporized by a weapons platform that fired projectiles at a significant fraction of the speed of light. With the destruction of their main fleet and the death of their supreme leader, the Zephyrian hegemony began to collapse from within. Regional governors declared independence, military commanders abandoned their posts, and entire star systems simply surrendered to human forces rather than face the alternative. The war, if it could even be called that, was effectively over. In less than 3 weeks, humanity had gone from being the victims of unprovoked aggression to completely dismantling one of the galaxy's major military powers. But the humans weren't finished yet. They had demonstrated their military superiority, rescued their people, and eliminated the immediate threat. Now came the final lesson, making sure that no other species would ever make the same mistake the Zephyrians had made. The galaxy was watching, and humanity intended to make sure the lesson was clear, unmistakable, and unforgettable. The surrender came not with fanfare or ceremony, but with a simple transmission broadcasted across all frequencies from the remaining Zephyrian government on their homeworld. Acting Supreme Leader Velkaran, a minor administrator who had suddenly found himself in charge of what remained of the hegemony, spoke the words that formally ended the shortest and most one-sided war in galactic history. To the human military forces, the message began, Velkaran's voice shaking with exhaustion and defeat. The Zephyrian hegemony formally requests immediate cessation of hostilities. We surrender unconditionally and await your terms. Admiral Rebecca Torres received the transmission aboard her flagship in orbit around Zephyr Prime. Around her, the bridge crew maintained their professional composure, but she could sense their satisfaction. Justice had been delivered swiftly and completely. Signal all human forces, she ordered. Offensive operations are suspended pending negotiation of surrender terms. Maintain defensive positions and continue search and rescue operations for any remaining human prisoners. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity now faced the challenge of transforming their overwhelming military victory into a lasting peace that would prevent similar tragedies in the future. President Catherine Hayes arrived in the Zephyr system aboard the diplomatic vessel New Horizons 3 days after the surrender. With her came not just negotiators and administrators, but also relief workers, medical personnel, and the resources needed to begin rebuilding the shattered remnants of the Zephyrian hegemony. The meeting took place on Zephyr Prime's largest moon, in a conference facility that had been hastily constructed by human engineering teams. The symbolism was intentional. This was neutral ground, a place where former enemies could meet as equals to discuss the future. Velkaran arrived with a small delegation of surviving Zephyrian officials, their ornate ceremonial armor replaced by simple civilian clothing. The contrast with their previous arrogance was stark and deliberate. President Hayes, Velkaran said as he entered the conference room, his forearms positioned in the Zephyrian gesture of submission. On behalf of what remains of the Zephyrian people, I thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. President Hayes studied the alien leader for a moment before responding. Let's be clear about something from the beginning, she said calmly. We're not here to gloat or to humiliate your people. We're here to ensure that the mistakes that led to this conflict are never repeated. The negotiations lasted for 6 days. The human terms were firm but not cruel. All human prisoners and their remains would be returned immediately. The Zephyrian government would provide full reparations to the families of those killed in the attacks on human colonies. All Zephyrian military forces would be reduced to a size sufficient only for internal security. Most importantly, the hegemony would renounce all claims to territory outside their core systems and would never again raise arms against any peaceful civilization. But the humans also offered something unexpected. Assistance. Your people are not our enemies, President Hayes explained to the Zephyrian delegation. Your leaders made a terrible decision, but that doesn't condemn your entire species to suffering. We will help you rebuild, help you establish a stable government, and help you find a new place in the galactic community. This offer of aid confused many of the Zephyrian officials. In their experience, conquest led to enslavement or extermination. The concept of a victor offering to help the defeated rebuild was completely foreign to their understanding of warfare. Why would you do this? Velkarin asked. You have defeated us completely? You could take whatever you wanted from our worlds. Because that's not who we are, President Hayes replied. We didn't fight this war to gain territory or resources. We fought to protect our people and to ensure that peaceful species can exist without fear of unprovoked aggression. Your people can be part of that future if you choose to be. The formal peace treaty was signed on the 7th day. As the documents were completed, President Hayes made one final statement that would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Let this be the last time any species makes the mistake of confusing human kindness for weakness. We chose peace not because we had to, but because we could afford to. We chose civilization not because we were incapable of anything else, but because we believed it was the better path. That choice is still available to everyone in this galaxy, but it must be a choice made by all sides. The treaty signing was broadcast across human space and throughout the galaxy. Species that had been watching the conflict with interest and concern saw something they had never expected. A complete military victory followed not by conquest and exploitation, but by reconciliation and assistance. The aftermath of the war transformed the galactic political landscape in ways that no one had anticipated. The complete destruction of the Zephyrian military had been impressive, but it was humanity's response to victory that truly shocked other civilizations. Within months, human engineering teams were helping to rebuild the infrastructure destroyed during the conflict. Human medical personnel were treating Zephyrian civilians injured in the fighting. Human educators were working with Zephyrian schools to develop new curricula that emphasized peaceful conflict resolution and interspecies cooperation. But most importantly, the human military forces that had appeared so suddenly and fought so effectively began to fade back into the shadows just as quickly. The massive fleets that had devastated Zephyrian forces simply disappeared, returning to hidden bases or resuming the appearance of peaceful civilian vessels. Ambassador Chen Lu, humanity's new diplomatic representative to the reformed Zephyrian government, stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt New Haven colony 6 months after the war's end. Below her, human families were once again working in the wheat fields that had been restored with Zephyrian labor and resources. Sarah Chen approached the observation deck, carrying her daughter Emma, who was now 9 years old and had insisted on helping with the colony's reconstruction efforts. Ambassador Chen, Sarah said with a smile, Emma wanted to show you something. Emma held up a small device that she had been working on in the colony's engineering workshop. It's a translator, she announced proudly. So human and Zephyrian kids can talk to each other when they're playing together. The ambassador examined the device with appropriate seriousness. This is excellent work, Emma. Have you tested it yet? Uh-huh, Emma replied excitedly. There's a Zephyrian family helping to rebuild the school, and they have a boy about my age. We've been teaching each other games from our different planets. This was the future that humanity had fought to preserve. Children of different species playing together, learning from each other, building friendships that would last for generations. It was a future that had been threatened by those who believed that might made right, but which had been secured by those who understood that true strength lay in the choice to protect the innocent. As the months passed, word of humanity's conduct during and after the war spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to reconsider their previous assessments of human capabilities and intentions. The peaceful human colonies that had seemed like easy targets were now understood to be outposts of a civilization that possessed both the power to destroy any aggressor and the wisdom to choose mercy over vengeance. The Galactic Trade Consortium, which had previously viewed humanity as a minor power of limited importance, suddenly found human representatives being invited to their most important negotiations. The Interspecies Diplomatic Council, which had operated for centuries without human participation, formally requested that humanity accept a permanent seat on their governing board. But perhaps the most significant change was in how conflicts between different species were resolved. The human example had demonstrated that it was possible to achieve complete victory through superior force, while still maintaining moral authority through restraint and mercy. Other civilizations began to adopt similar approaches to their own disputes, choosing negotiation and peaceful resolution over the traditional cycle of conquest and revenge. A year after the end of the war, Admiral Rebecca Torres stood once again on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at the fleet assembly area. But now, instead of warships preparing for battle, she watched as the last of humanity's military vessels returned to their hidden bases, or resumed their peaceful missions. "Any regrets, Admiral?" General Marcus Stone asked, joining her at the observation window. "About the war? None at all," Rebecca replied. "Those bastards got exactly what they deserved. About what comes next? That remains to be seen." "The politicians seem optimistic," Marcus observed. "They think this will usher in a new era of galactic peace and cooperation." "Maybe it will," Rebecca said. "But we both know that there will always be someone, somewhere, who thinks they can take what isn't theirs by force. The galaxy is a big place, and not everyone learned the lesson we taught the Zephyrians. So we stay ready." "We stay ready," Rebecca confirmed. "But we also hope we never have to use that readiness again." As if to underscore her point, a new message appeared on the communication displays around the observation deck. It was from the colony ship New Endeavor, which had just departed Earth for a star system on the far edge of explored space. "Luna Station, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the New Endeavor. We are beginning our journey to the Kepler 438 system, where we will establish humanity's newest colony. Our passenger manifest includes 2,000 families seeking a peaceful life among the stars, as well as several dozen Zephyrian volunteers who have requested permission to join our colonial effort. We expect to arrive at our destination in 14 months and will begin broadcasting regular updates once our settlement is established. For now, we send our thanks to all those who made this journey possible, and our hopes for a future where all species can explore the galaxy together in peace." Rebecca smiled as she listened to the message. This was why they had fought. Not for territory or resources, but for the right of peaceful beings to build new homes and new lives without fear of those who would take everything by force. The war with the Zephyrian hegemony was over, but humanity's real mission was just beginning. They had proven that they could defend themselves and others when necessary. Now they had to prove that they could build something better than the cycle of violence that had dominated galactic politics for so long. Throughout the galaxy, other species watched and waited to see what humanity would do with the power they had so decisively demonstrated. Some hoped for leadership and protection, others feared eventual human domination. But all of them had learned a fundamental truth that would shape galactic politics for generations to come. Humanity had chosen to be peaceful, not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to make that choice. And anyone who tried to take that choice away from them would discover what they were truly capable of when pushed too far. The creatures that the Zephyrians couldn't command had returned to their peaceful pursuits, but they would always be watching, always be ready, and always be prepared to remind the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed. The new galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the Zephyrian hegemony was a safer place for peaceful species, a more dangerous place for aggressors, and a constant reminder that the choice between civilization and savagery was always just that, a choice. Humanity had made their choice long ago. The question now was what choice the rest of the galaxy would make in response.